He can't move around in Jacksonville without us knowing about it. And that's for the betterment of our community.
The courtroom went completely silent as alleged associates of Foolio began revealing details that nobody expected to hear out loud. What was supposed to be a routine legal proceeding suddenly turned into a shocking expose, with statements so intense that even seasoned court watchers couldn't believe they were being said on record. Fans who thought they knew the full story are now questioning everything, because these revelations paint a very different picture of what was really happening behind the scenes. As names were mentioned and timelines were laid out, the atmosphere inside the courtroom reportedly shifted fast. Sources say the judge, attorneys, and spectators were all visibly stunned as alleged associates described private conversations, hidden tensions, and decisions that may have played a major role in how events unfolded. For years, rumors have circulated online about Foolio's inner circle, but until now, none of it had been spoken under oath. What makes this moment so insane is the timing. Just as public interest around Foolio's past conflicts and controversies had started to cool down, this testimony reignited everything. Old lyrics, social media posts, and interviews are now being re-examined with fresh eyes. Fans are realizing that certain lines and moments may not have been artistic exaggeration, but reflections of real-life pressure and unseen conflicts. The internet wasted no time reacting. Clips from outside the courthouse, leaked summaries, and second-hand accounts began spreading within minutes. Comment sections exploded with theories, shock, and disbelief. Some fans feel betrayed, others feel vindicated, and many are simply stunned that people so close to Foolio are now speaking openly in a legal setting where words carry serious consequences. This isn't just another hip-hop court story. It's a reminder of how fast loyalty can shift when real consequences are on the table. Alleged associates who once appeared solid are now central figures in a case that could reshape how Foolio's entire story is remembered. And the most chilling part, according to those present, this may only be the beginning. With more testimony expected and sealed details slowly coming to light, one question now hangs over everything. How much of what fans believed was true, and how much was carefully hidden until the courtroom forced it into the open? The first day of testimony changed everything people thought they knew. What had been framed for months as a case built mostly on speculation suddenly took on a disturbing level of detail once alleged associates began speaking under oath. According to those inside the courtroom, the shift was immediate. Faces tightened, whispers stopped, and the casual curiosity that usually fills the gallery vanished. This wasn't gossip anymore, this was sworn testimony, and every word carried weight. One of the most striking elements was how calmly the alleged associate spoke. There was no dramatic delivery, no emotional breakdowns, just measured statements that made the content even more unsettling. They described private meetings, phone calls that were never meant to be recorded, and decisions made in moments of fear and paranoia. Prosecutors leaned heavily into timelines, forcing witnesses to place events side by side in a way that exposed contradictions fans had never noticed before. For years, Foolio's public image was built around defiance, survival, and constant pressure from the streets. But in court, a different version began to emerge, one shaped by internal conflict and mistrust. Alleged associates hinted that not everyone in the circle was on the same page, and that tensions had been quietly escalating long before things reached a breaking point. Small disagreements, they claimed, slowly turned into deep fractures that outsiders never saw. The courtroom reportedly reacted strongest when testimony touched on loyalty. One witness described how relationships shifted once legal consequences became real. People who once appeared inseparable began distancing themselves, communicating through intermediaries, or cutting contact entirely. The implication was chilling. When freedom is on the line, survival often replaces loyalty. That idea alone sent a wave through fans following the case closely. Prosecutors also focused on patterns rather than single incidents. Instead of isolating one moment, they presented a broader narrative, suggesting that certain actions weren't random but part of a longer chain of decisions. As alleged associates filled in gaps, moments from Foolio's past, interviews, online posts, even lyrics, suddenly felt different. What once sounded like bravado now felt closer to coded messages shaped by real fear and ongoing conflict. Defense attorneys pushed back hard, reminding the court that these were alleged associates, not proven collaborators, and that testimony under pressure doesn't always equal truth. They questioned motives, pointing out plea deals, reduced sentences, and the powerful incentive to cooperate. That tension between credibility and self-preservation hung heavy in the room. Every answer raised a new question. Was this honesty, or was it strategy? Outside the courthouse, fans were already reacting. Social media timelines filled with slowed-down clips of past Foolio interviews, with users trying to connect dots in real time. Some felt blindsided, saying the testimony didn't match the image they had supported for years. Others claimed the signs were always there, hidden in plain sight. The divide was immediate and emotional. What made this testimony hit harder was the realization that these weren't enemies speaking. These were people who had shared cars, studios, and private conversations. Hearing them describe fear, distrust, and internal breakdowns made the situation feel less like a distant crime story and more like a tragic unraveling. The courtroom wasn't just hearing evidence, it was watching the collapse of an inner circle. By the end of the day, it was clear this case wouldn't hinge on one dramatic revelation. Instead, it would be built brick by brick, statement by statement, slowly reshaping the narrative fans thought they understood. The silence as court adjourned said it all. No one rushed out. No one spoke loudly. Everyone seemed to understand the same thing. Once alleged associates start talking, there's no going back. And with more witnesses expected, this first phase felt less like an ending and more like the opening crack in a much larger truth, one that could permanently redefine Foolio's legacy in the eyes of the public. As proceedings continued, the focus shifted from shocking statements to the mechanics behind them, how these alleged associates knew what they claimed to know, and why they were speaking now. Prosecutors methodically walked witnesses through ordinary moments that suddenly carried extraordinary implications. Rides that took longer than expected, phones that went silent at critical times, meetings that happened off the books. None of it sounded dramatic on its own, but together it formed a pattern that felt unsettlingly deliberate. What stood out most was the emphasis on communication. Testimony suggested that conversations defense attorneys seized on those gaps. They highlighted inconsistencies between timelines, pointing out moments when memories blurred or dates shifted under questioning. They argued that stress, fear, and the promise of leniency can warp recollection, especially when witnesses are asked to reconstruct chaotic periods months or years later. Each cross-examination aimed to slow the momentum, to remind jurors that uncertainty still existed beneath the confident delivery. Still, the cumulative effect was hard to ignore. Multiple alleged associates, independent of one another, described similar dynamics: rising paranoia, internal disagreements, and an unspoken understanding that things were spiraling. The courtroom reacted when one witness explained how routine decisions began to feel risky, how plans changed last minute without explanation. It painted a picture of a circle tightening, not expanding. Outside the courthouse, commentary intensified. Legal analysts debated credibility, while fans dissected every reported detail. Some questioned why these individuals waited until now to speak. Others argued that timing is often dictated by legal realities, not loyalty. The conversation turned philosophical. What does loyalty mean when legal consequences loom? And who gets to define betrayal? The judge repeatedly reminded the room to separate allegation from fact. That distinction mattered, especially as public opinion threatened to run ahead of the evidence. Even so, the testimonies had already shifted perception. They reframed past events, suggesting that what looked like randomness might have been influenced by fear and fractured trust. The story was no longer about a single figure. It was about an ecosystem under strain. A particularly tense moment came when prosecutors presented corroborating materials: call logs, location data, and timestamps, used not to prove intent outright, but to anchor stories to reality. Defense pushed back, noting that data can show proximity without purpose. The back and forth underscored the trial's central tension: interpretation. Facts may be fixed, but meaning is contested. As the day wore on, fatigue set in, yet attention didn't wane. Observers noted how witnesses chose their words carefully, often correcting themselves mid-sentence. That caution spoke volumes. It suggested awareness of consequences, of how a single phrase could be replayed endlessly outside the courtroom. Every pause felt heavy. By adjournment, the narrative had deepened rather than resolved. Alleged associates hadn't delivered a single explosive confession. Instead, they contributed pieces to a mosaic that prosecutors hoped would make sense when viewed as a whole. Defense, meanwhile, succeeded in planting doubt, enough to remind everyone that stories can be shaped by pressure. The public reaction mirrored the courtroom's divide. Some felt the testimony clarified long-standing questions. Others believed it proved nothing beyond uncertainty. But even skeptics acknowledged one thing: the case had moved beyond rumor. It was now anchored to sworn statements, scrutinized evidence, and a process that doesn't bend easily to internet narratives. As court prepared to reconvene, anticipation hung thick. More witnesses meant more pieces, and more opportunities for contradictions to surface. Whether those pieces would lock into place or splinter apart remained to be seen. But one reality was clear: the story was no longer static. With each day, it evolved, challenging assumptions and forcing a reckoning with how quickly loyalty, memory, and truth can blur when the stakes are highest. The courtroom energy intensified as the trial progressed into its third day, and the stakes became clearer than ever. By now, everyone in the room, from jurors to journalists to spectators, could sense that the testimony of these alleged associates wasn't just adding details. It was beginning to define a narrative that could shape public perception of Foolio for years to come. What once felt like scattered stories of loyalty and betrayal now appeared as part of a larger, interconnected pattern, each revelation layering on top of the previous one, building toward an understanding that was impossible to ignore. Alleged associates described how small incidents, once brushed off as coincidences, actually hinted at deeper issues within Foolio's inner circle. Missed calls, cryptic messages, and sudden changes in plans were no longer trivial. There were signs of growing tension, distrust, and fear. Witnesses explained how even casual remarks in private settings could escalate into serious consequences, creating an atmosphere where paranoia became the norm rather than the exception. Each statement seemed calculated, as if underlining the fragility of the relationships surrounding Foolio, and the courtroom absorbed it in near silent disbelief. One particularly striking moment involved a testimony about a decision that, on the surface, appeared minor but was emblematic of a larger tension. An alleged associate recounted how an ordinary meeting, something that would typically involve casual discussion, turned into a high-stakes evaluation of trust. Every attendee was scrutinized, every word weighed, and decisions about loyalty were silently made. Prosecutors highlighted these moments to show that the inner circle wasn't just a social network. It was a tightly controlled environment operating under constant stress and suspicion. Defense attorneys, however, were quick to challenge every detail. They questioned the reliability of memory under pressure, noting that the witnesses had been recalling events from months or even years prior. They reminded the court that human perception is inherently flawed and that stress can magnify misunderstandings. But despite their attempts to undermine credibility, the consistent patterns emerging from multiple testimonies made it difficult to dismiss the overall picture entirely. The narrative wasn't dependent on one person's memory. It was corroborated across several accounts. As the testimony unfolded, the focus increasingly shifted to motivation. Alleged associates were asked why they were speaking now, why certain details had not surfaced earlier, and whether personal interest, such as plea deals or reduced sentences, was influencing their accounts. The answers were measured, often emphasizing a sense of responsibility to provide the court with accurate information rather than personal gain. Still, the acknowledgement that consequences were a driving force in timing highlighted the precarious balance between truth, strategy, and survival in this high-stakes environment. Outside the courtroom, the public's fascination only grew. Fans dissected leaked clips and recounted every detail online, trying to piece together the timeline of events with the witnesses' testimonies. Social media was flooded with speculation, analysis, and debate, with users divided over the credibility of the alleged associates and the implications for Foolio's reputation. Some argued that the testimonies confirmed suspicions they had long held. Others suggested that nothing was proven beyond reasonable doubt. Regardless of stance, everyone was captivated by the unfolding drama. By midday, prosecutors introduced additional evidence to support the witnesses' accounts: timestamps, message logs, and corroborating communications. These weren't presented as definitive proof of wrongdoing, but rather as context to reinforce the sequence and timing of events. Each new piece, what had once seemed like isolated anecdotes, now felt part of a carefully documented pattern, underscoring the complexity of Foolio's situation and the environment around him. The mood in the courtroom was palpable. Spectators leaned forward in their seats. Jurors appeared increasingly attentive, and even seasoned legal reporters seemed taken aback by the depth of insight these witnesses provided. It wasn't just the content of what was said. It was the clarity with which witnesses described the chain reactions, the consequences, and the subtle shifts in relationships that had previously been invisible to outsiders. By the end of the third day, a few undeniable truths were emerging. The inner circle around Foolio had not been a monolithic, unbreakable network. Trust was conditional, loyalty was fragile, and fear had been a constant undercurrent. Alleged associates weren't just providing gossip. They were mapping the pressures, decisions, and conflicts that defined the environment in which Foolio operated. The courtroom had become a lens, revealing a world that few outside had ever truly understood. And while much remained unresolved, it was clear to everyone following the case that the testimony of these alleged associates had fundamentally altered the story. What began as a series of shocking anecdotes had evolved into a layered, complex narrative that forced reconsideration of everything previously assumed about Foolio's life, decisions, and inner circle. By the time court adjourned, there was an unspoken understanding. The story had grown, and the public, and Foolio's legacy, would never view it the same way again. As the trial entered its fourth day, the intensity in the courtroom had shifted from shock to a meticulous unraveling of events, revealing layers of complexity no one outside Foolio's circle had anticipated. Witnesses began providing context not just for the actions of Foolio himself, but for the decisions, alliances, and fractures that defined his alleged inner circle. This day wasn't about explosive moments of viral sound bites. It was about showing the mechanisms behind what had seemed like chaos. And as the testimony unfolded, it became clear just how fragile loyalty had been from the very beginning. One witness described meetings where the atmosphere was tense, even in casual settings. Ordinary conversations carried weight, and even small comments were interpreted as signs of allegiance or betrayal. According to testimony, members of the circle were constantly gauging each other, weighing who could be trusted, and recalibrating relationships based on the smallest signals. Prosecutors used these accounts to illustrate the environment in which Foolio operated, a world governed by both fear and strategic thinking, where every interaction could have serious consequences. The narrative painted by these alleged associates was one of gradual escalation. Early disagreements or misunderstandings, minor on the surface, had compounded over time into a pervasive sense of distrust. Witnesses described how decisions that once seemed inconsequential, who drove whom, which messages were answered or ignored, suddenly became markers of loyalty or warning signs of betrayal. It was a world where actions and inactions spoke volumes, and where the weight of choice was magnified by constant scrutiny. Prosecutors emphasized how patterns repeated themselves across different witnesses' accounts. Multiple individuals described the same tensions, the same turning points, and even the same subtle conflicts, suggesting that these weren't isolated perceptions but part of a wider systemic issue within the group. Each corroborating detail strengthened the credibility of the narrative, creating a mosaic that slowly revealed the intricate power dynamics, trust issues, and fear-based decision-making behind the scenes. Defense attorneys, of course, challenged every point. They reminded the court that perception is not reality, that human memory is flawed, and that stress can distort recollection. They questioned motivations, suggesting that witnesses might exaggerate or manipulate their accounts to gain favor, reduce sentences, or protect themselves from prosecution. The tension between these competing perspectives added another layer of drama to an already charged atmosphere, leaving jurors and spectators constantly re-evaluating what they believed to be true. One of the most dramatic portions of the day came when an alleged associate discussed how alliances shifted suddenly. People who had appeared unwaveringly loyal were suddenly distant, communication channels closed, and certain members made decisions that prioritized self-preservation over solidarity. According to testimony, these shifts weren't always visible to outsiders, which explained why fans and observers had been blindsided by subsequent events. The courtroom absorbed these revelations in near silence, with even seasoned reporters noting the gravity of what was being disclosed. The subtlety of this day's testimony was its power. Instead of sensational claims, the focus was on the quiet, incremental moments that ultimately defined relationships and decisions. Each small example, someone arriving late to a meeting, choosing not to answer a call, shifting a responsibility, was contextualized as part of a larger pattern of distrust and fractured loyalty. The cumulative effect was sobering. The environment surrounding Foolio wasn't just high pressure, it was structurally unstable. Outside the courtroom, the public reaction mirrored this realization. Social media uses dissected timelines, connecting past interviews, online posts, and even lyrics to the newly revealed context. Fans debated whether these revelations changed their perception of Foolio, his associates, and the overall narrative that had been circulating for years. Comment sections exploded with speculation, and hashtags related to the case trended once again. But this time the focus was more analytical than emotional. People were piecing together the why behind events, not just the what. By the end of the fourth day, a clearer picture had emerged. The alleged inner circle was shown to be far more complicated than anyone imagined. Alliances were fragile, loyalties conditional, and fear a constant driver. Alleged associates weren't simply recounting events. They were illustrating the psychological and social pressures that had shaped every decision, every interaction, and ultimately, the environment in which Foolio operated. As the court adjourned, everyone understood that the story was no longer about individual actions alone. It was about patterns, relationships, and the invisible forces shaping behavior. With more witnesses scheduled, the narrative promised to become even richer, revealing additional layers of conflict, strategy, and survival that had remained hidden until now. And while the public digested the details, one reality was unmistakable. The myth, image, and legacy of Foolio were being rewritten before their eyes, one testimony at a time. By the fifth day of the proceedings, the courtroom atmosphere had transformed into something almost clinical, though the content was anything but. The initial shock of the earlier testimonies had worn off, replaced by a slow, intense scrutiny of the details that had already been revealed. Alleged associates who had previously offered fragments of insight now began connecting the dots, providing a cohesive narrative that illuminated the complex web of relationships, decisions, and hidden tensions surrounding Foolio. For observers, it was like watching the final pieces of a puzzle click into place, revealing a picture far more intricate and darker than anyone outside the circle had imagined. Witnesses described the constant pressure that permeated every interaction. Every meeting, every call, and even casual conversations carried the weight of potential consequences. Decisions weren't made lightly, and no one could assume loyalty would remain intact indefinitely. Alleged associates explained how fear, ambition, and self-preservation shaped behavior more than camaraderie or trust. These weren't just personal choices. They were survival strategies within a tightly controlled, high-stakes environment. One particularly striking revelation involved how information moved within the group. Witnesses detailed a network of intermediaries, whispered warnings, and coded communications designed to control what could be shared and with whom. Simple misunderstandings or miscommunications could escalate, and what seemed trivial from the outside, like a delayed message or missed meeting, often had far-reaching consequences. Prosecutors emphasized that this wasn't speculation. Multiple witnesses described these dynamics independently, creating a consistent pattern of secrecy and strategic behavior. Defense attorneys again challenged credibility, questioning motives and highlighting potential incentive for cooperation with the prosecution. But the corroboration between accounts made it difficult to dismiss the testimony outright. Even if individual memories could be flawed or influenced by personal interests, the repeated patterns painted a picture that felt undeniable. The inner circle was not as cohesive or loyal as it appeared, and fear often dictated actions more than trust or friendship. Throughout the day, the narrative shifted from isolated incidents to systemic tension. Alleged associates described how small disagreements could ripple outward, affecting multiple relationships at once. Decisions made in private meetings could unintentionally or intentionally alter dynamics across the group. By showing how these micro-level interactions compounded over time, the testimony provided insight into why larger conflicts eventually erupted in public or legal settings. The courtroom witnessed the slow buildup of a complex social ecosystem under extreme stress. Another key theme emerged around the concept of perception versus reality. Witnesses explained how external appearances, videos, social media posts, public statements, often masked the real dynamics within the circle. Loyalty, aggression, or friendship displayed publicly could be performative, a facade designed to protect individuals or manipulate perception. These revelations reframed many past events in a new light, prompting observers to reconsider everything they thought they knew about Foolio and his associates. Perhaps most compelling were the personal reflections offered by some witnesses. While much of the testimony was factual, several alleged associates shared the emotional toll of navigating this environment. Anxiety, mistrust, and the constant calculation of risk were recurring themes. These accounts humanized the figures involved, showing that beyond headlines and public speculation, the people closest to Foolio were operating under relentless pressure, where a single misstep could have catastrophic consequences. Outside the courtroom, the public was consuming every update with a mix of fascination and disbelief. Analysts, fans, and commentators debated the credibility and implications of each testimony, piecing together timelines, relationships, and motivations. Social media erupted with theories, reactions, and reassessments of past events. By this stage, it was clear that the narrative had shifted from rumor and speculation to a documented, multi-layered account of